Hello once again, it's Mart with Max Q and another weekly update on the J-3 Cub Restoration project. Here is the date just for reference, and so we're moving right into August, and the weather's been pretty warm. Actually, there at the end of July and here in August in northern Indiana, we've had quite a bit of 90-degree weather, and I just thought that might be kind of interesting to point out. In my little 30 by 30 shop here, which the walls are insulated, and the ceiling is insulated, but I don't have any windows in here other than there is a glass panel in the door. That's the only natural light that comes in. And I've just really been amazed that I don't think it's been over 78 degrees in here, no matter how hot it gets outside. And part of that is because I don't use the door any more than just to get in and get the door shut. So I don't let any of the outside air, or minimize how much of the outside air can mix with this air. But I've just been really surprised because I have heat for the winter time, and I assumed that in the long run I'd want to have air conditioning for the summertime, but honestly I just don't think the air conditioning is needed without having the windows. I think if there were windows in here, especially if they were on a side where the sun could shine in, I think it'd be an oven in here. So I'm not 100% sure about all that. I didn't really plan it from that standpoint. It was just cheaper to build it without windows. But anyway, so that's been really nice. It's been remarkably comfortable, and I can have a fan to move some air around if need be to give a little more comfort. So anyway, so that's kind of the status of the shop. It is now what I'd call a fabric shop because I've got quite a bit of fabric work going on. Got started last week. And so we're going to take a look at that here in just a minute. But before we do, I've got a couple other things related to the project that I just thought I'd share first, and then we'll talk some about the fabric. So let's take a look, two spots. One, let's take a look in here where the fuselage is, but just laying on the floor, I have the rudder. And I talked last week about the AMOC for the AD on the rudder, which is the alternative method of compliance. So there is a nice way to fix these rudders short of having to replace them, or one option is to completely replace the main spar tube, but that's a lot of work cutting all that out and welding it back in. So this AMOC that Alex Koerner developed, and I'll have the link again in the description, uses this 4-foot long piece of 3/4 049. And you might be able to see up here, I've got the holes drilled for the rosette welds. And then back down here, there's 2 holes, one on each side. And so this tube will wind up sliding up inside the main structural tube there, up through the bottom. And it goes all the way in up to about here. So it runs from nearly the very top, that 4 feet, down to about here. Gets welded on both sides in both of those locations, and then you do a linseed oil treatment with the the hole pointed up, and soak that whole interior with the linseed oil for long-term preservative, and then that's going to be pretty well all set. So then that rudder would be ready for cover when I get that done. It won't take too much longer to get that ready. So that's I'm glad that's going to be able to speed up the process on the rudder. So, and then I thought I'd show out here, I've been working on the fuel tank. I found a product. I like doing research, and I like doing things maybe a little different than what most people do. I looked at a bunch of pictures online of the interior of J-3 Cubs, and I just felt like the ones that had an aluminum colored fuel tank looked really nice. There was some contrast there, and it kind of lightened up the interior. So I've started removing the paint on this, which is coming off really nice. And actually it's a pretty nice surface, just the bare aluminum like that with a little bit of Scotch-Brite, but it's not a super uniform surface. So I found this paint here, which is a Seymour paint, and it's designed to put on like transmissions of cars and such. It creates a really nice, at least from everything I've been able to see, it should create a really nice aluminum finish that's actually got some aluminum in the paint, but it's predominantly an aluminum colored finish. but it'll be very uniform, and it's a matte finish. And I just think that, you know, goes with the theme of like what I did with the hand crank for the trim. So there'll be this nice satin finish on the inside of the cockpit. And so anyway, I think that's going to be a really interesting little thing to give a try and see how it goes. I do need to pressure test the tank, or you know, leak test the tank before I get too committed to all that, to make sure we don't run into some surprises there. But otherwise, I was really happy that the paint stripping is starting really well there. So let's go real quick back here into the spray booth, because so here are the stabilizers. I covered those last week. So the two horizontal stabilizers covered in the blanket method. So here on the back side, there's not a seam on the straight line here because the fabric literally folds all the way around and then just overlaps here on the bottom side, so that the top, there won't be any seam. And of course there's tapes that go over all that, but anywhere that you can avoid having a seam showing through a tape, because they can be a little difficult to hide. And with a little bit of fill and sanding, you can definitely minimize that visible. But of course, if you don't have it on the top surface where it's obviously visible, then you're never really going to notice that. And again, there's going to be a tape that goes over all of that that'll seal that off. And of course, it needs reinforcing tape, it needs stitched, and then it needs the surface tapes on it. So there's a lot of work to do there. But the other thing that was kind of nice is that, which this is interesting too, I'm just now noticing that the bushing in this hinge is not there. And so I'm not sure where that's at. I'll have to go looking for that. So anyway, I just thought it was really nice too, though, the way that when you do the blanket here, and so you don't have a seam on this side, it's really easy to get a really clean set of holes that go over these hinges, and just makes that a little easier to finish, so that everything does look really, really good. So that's kind of an area where I like to look and see how well somebody's done it. And in the long run, it really doesn't matter. The whole point is you just want the airplane to be airworthy. But I'm a little bit of a freak for trying to make things look really nice as well. So I try to go the extra mile. And so that's one area where you can really see how well somebody has done when you look at little protrusions like that and how the finish is. So hopefully those are going to turn out really good. And then out here, so I've also done some work on the ailerons. So I have one aileron here that's covered, and again, it's in the same condition. It's been shrunk, but this is only at the 250 degree, the initial shrink. Actually, those stabs over there, and you might have noticed that I have a little note there that says both of them at 300. So I've done the 300 degree shrink on both of those. But there's then a third at 350 degrees to get the full tightening of the fabric, and that's yet to do. And so it's real easy, especially when you have a bunch of these parts rolling forward at the same time, to get confused. So I just put the note on there so I know where I'm at. So this just has the initial take the slack out, because it's quite slack when you first put the fabric on there. And so they've got quite a ways to go yet, is what I'm saying, because I've got the additional shrinking to do, and then of course we've got on the ribs there'll be some reinforcing tape, there's some stitching to do, there'll be the surface tapes to put on, and then also where the like this is the control horn that protrudes on the top side and then on the bottom side. So there's going to be cutting, trimming, and taping to do all around those, which that's also the center hinge. And then we've got a hinge down at this end and a hinge down there at the other end. So those all get tapes to put it around to trim it out and to just make it more secure all the way around. So there is quite a bit yet to do, but it sure feels like progress to see the fabric not only on but shrunk. The other thing I was going to say is that you have to be careful when you go cutting holes for the things that protrude through, mostly because it's just real easy with some of them, like these horns, because they're curved. If you don't pay attention and really measure, you might cut more fabric away than you really wanted. So it's really a good idea to think that through quite a bit before you start cutting things. Again, you do have quite a bit of ability to cover things with the surface tapes, but obviously there's no need having more hole than you need. So, and then the other aileron, so I did this on both of them. I used the anti-chafe tape that Stewart Systems has, and I went ahead and covered basically all of the rivets. This is Seconite 102, the lightweight 2.7 or somewhere very near 2.7 ounces per square yard. And so in that sense, it's a fairly lightweight fabric. It's fairly thin. On the Super Cub, when I did it, I did a mix of this weight, and then I did also used the 3.7 ounce in the various areas. And on the control surfaces, I used the heavyweight fabric. And the reason that's of an interest here is that I did not put this chafe tape on the ailerons on the Super Cub, but because I was using the heavier fabric, it works out better going over the protrusions of the rivets. But because this is the lightweight fabric, and you don't twofold, you don't want the chafing that could be caused by the rivets over time. But also, by putting the tape on, you help to reduce the visual nature of the bumps to begin with, especially with this thinner fabric. So it's a bit tedious, actually. As you can see, there's a lot of taping that goes on there to cover up any of the chafing potential points. But anyway, so that's all done. I did them both the same. And then this one's got the glue already on the leading edge. So the piece of fabric, which is this piece here, it's folded over. This is also the blanket method. So basically the fabric is going to attach here and go over the top, wraps around the bottom, and then it comes underneath. And then there's a glue joint then here that needs to be at least an inch, and I'm running about 2 inches of overlap here. And if you look again at this other aileron, you can see exactly how that is. So this is the fabric coming up, and this is where it ends here at that pinked edge. So that's the second layer of fabric gluing to this first layer here, and the green, of course, is the glue, which is the overlap. The minimum is an inch. We've got about 2 inches here. So doing the same procedure on both of these. And in fact, this is I watched the older Stewart video covering a Satin aileron, and this is very much the same start and end point, I'm pretty sure, for what they did there. There's some leeway there. You can do things a little bit different as long as you've got that 1 inch overlap. But if you watch that video, which maybe I'll link that one in the description as well, you'll be able to see that it's really the same exact procedure. The big difference here is that the Cub ailerons have the rounded forward of the spar, and on the Champ and the Satin, it's a straight line, and so it's a little bit easier when you're capping off the ends. So over here you can see how you just have to deal with this curve a little bit more, and so I've cut sections, and then I do a variety of things to try to make sure that these are as unobtrusive as possible. And then I wind up putting a tape. Of course, it would definitely have a tape over it. There's different ways you can do taping as far as that goes, as long as you're meeting the minimum requirement and such. So what I did on the Super Cub, I did a similar thing like this, and then I run a tape right along the edge here, and it encapsulates all that and helps to hide. And again, with a little bit of fill and sanding, you can also hide any of this see-through, this telegraphing. But it takes a little more attention to detail to do that. But I like to do that for sure. The other thing I was going to show is in this end here, actually, well, it was on the other aileron, so it's not the tip end, it's the inboard end. But I have a video that I shot of doing that, and so if you watch here, you can see. This is where I wanted to show the difference in this glue compared to a lot of the other glues. So the glue where I'm putting it on, of course, is completely wet and fresh. From where I started all the way to the left, I put that glue on earlier, and so it has tacked up. And the whole point I'm trying to say here is that it's important to understand that when you put the glue on and then it's still wet like it is there on that last bay, and this is what I'm showing, when you put that piece of fabric on there, there is no hold of any sort. It just falls completely off. Now over here, if I rub that on a little bit, and you're not going to see a lot of hold, it still pulls off, but it actually does hold a little bit, and that's where it kind of functions like a clamp for you. And then especially, this is the real beauty of it, when you take the iron, and if you notice, I'm just ironing straight left and right. I'm not hitting the curve, so I'm actually making a very small contact point. And even with that little bit, it has caused the glue to bond into the fabric to the point that I can tip the whole thing on that horn in the middle. So it shows there's quite a bit of grip. And obviously then when you do the entire surface with the iron and make all of it bond like that, you're getting a tremendous amount of hold. Again, just showing there that when it's wet, you just have no hold power at all. And the point is, it's just important to understand that, because if you think that you can put the fabric into the wet glue and have it hold for you, you're just wrong. It just won't do it. But here's the thing, you don't have to wait long. And in fact, I timed it today. It was 74, 75 degrees in here, but high humidity. It's about 80% humidity this morning. And so I was timing, and it took about 14 minutes for the glue to get to the point that the moisture aspect of it was all gone, and it was to the point of being tacky. So that's what they say. It's 10 to 15 minutes, you know, it depends on the conditions. So when you get to the tacky point, then you can just push the fabric into it and you get a tiny little bit of hold, which is really handy because it releases so easy. You can reposition and reposition and reposition till you get all the slack out and get everything where you want it. Then you take the iron and you do that just a little bit of contact along a point to cause the glue to soften and bond into the fibers of the Dacron. And then you get tremendous hold. And then you can confirm everything's where you want it. And then at that point, you take the iron and you embed all of that into the glue. And then you do another coat of glue, and we'll go over that later. But that's the part where, if you've watched the Stewart videos, you put that extra glue on, it goes through the second layer of fabric, it bonds to the glue that's underneath, and then you take the paper towel or some sort of towel and you wipe off the excess, because when that glue gets hard, and it doesn't really get hard, it actually stays fairly pliable, but what I mean is when it gets dry, when it's no longer wet, if it's clumpy, it'll create ridges, and those ridges will show once you put a tape on and such. But if you wipe it off, you make it to where there's nothing rising up, and it's very, very smooth. And the other thing is, when you do that wiping procedure, you're also even forcing more of that glue to interact with the glue that was from the first layer of fabric. So it's really quite a slick little system. I think it takes a lot of the angst out of the gluing of fabric on a surface. So anyway, and then also I just wanted to show that this is not something you get when you, well, I don't know, maybe you can buy the manual, but you can download it for free. So I printed it on cardstock, and then I punched it and put it in this binder, and so it's really nice having this information always readily available, and they go over all the details. And so like the heat tautening, it talks about the 250, 300, and 350 degree levels. And then the next step is to put reinforcing tape on and do rib stitching for the wing and ailerons and such. And then you eventually get to the point that you're putting on the tapes, and they talk about all of that in detail. And then after the tapes, you thin the glue just a little bit, and you put a layer on, like shown here, where you fill the weave and you seal the weave, as the term is here. And that is a tremendous, that glue, when it's thin just a little bit, soaks into the fabric. It just becomes totally one with this whole fabric surface, and then it becomes the substrate for the Eco Fill to bond to, and then of course you eventually have the color coats on top of that. We'll be talking about all that for sure more. And again, I definitely encourage, because those old videos that Stewart Systems has still available on YouTube are actually, they're really, really well done. And I highly recommend that people watch that, because I've done the same again. I watch it again to make sure I understand, because it's been 7 or 8 years since I've done this, so I want to make sure I'm following procedure, because I don't want any headaches. So, and anyway, otherwise, it's things are going really well, and hopefully I'll have that other aileron done. Maybe I'll get some stitching done by next week. Of course, I've got the elevators to do. The rudder, once I get the AMOC complete, I can get the fabric on that rudder. And so anyway, knock out all these little small pieces that, even though they're small, they're tedious and there's a lot going on. Obviously the wings are huge by comparison, but until you get to the rib stitching, which is a big honking deal because there's so many ribs and so much distance. But a lot of the other work, it's surprising that you can get a wing glued up fairly quickly and get some shrink on it, and you feel like, hey, it's really starting to be something. Which, of course, so much about aircraft building and restoration is deceiving that way. But if you don't know, especially in the home-built airplane world, when you get to the point that you finally put the wings on the airplane and it's really looking like something, we call that 90% done and 90% to go, because it's really deceiving. The details take so much time. But obviously that's still a great place to be when you get to that point and it starts to look like something, because that really helps to drive you forward. So anyway, so there you go. We're a fabric shop now, which of course was the goal, and things are going just fine. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.